Now, here's Antoine de Caunes with his French-flavored rock review, Rapido.
Rapido. Hello and welcome to Rapido, the show that each week makes us pause and ask the question, am I dreaming or have I died and gone to rock and roll heaven? Well, yes, my friends. It's a heavenly Rapido with stories on Billy Idol, Inspiral Carpets, Jeff Beck, the Archaos Circus, Daniel Lanois's studio, and our first story on Depeche Mode. I know it's hard to believe, but Depeche Mode, who we all remember as sweet little lads running around wearing black lipstick and miniskirts, are now celebrating their 10th anniversary as a band and the international success of their 7th, is it really their 7th? Yeah. Their 7th album, Violator. Yes, Mode Mania is everywhere, even in the United States, a country not usually fond of moody English boys with synthesizers and funny haircuts. But Rapido likes funny haircuts, and in fact, Rapido could use a good haircut. So we traveled to London to meet the kings of existential pop, Depeche Mode.
It took 10 years and 22 singles, but Depeche Mode is now the word in the music called progressive techno-pop. Tonight, the band is appearing in person for an autograph party at a West LA record store. And it has attracted thousands of fans waiting to see their music idols.
It's probably LA, New York. But I thought once you start getting, further down south, and I just thought, it wouldn't get played at all. But we were very surprised by the response. It didn't get massive radio support, but it got enough, to go to sort of acting. And I think the film showed us sort of very naturally. So I think, a lot of people warmed to us who hadn't necessarily liked us before.
To be particularly great at making dance music, we thought that our songs have been our strong point, and occasionally we've sort of hit the nail on the head if we've tried to make a dance record, but we really often got it wrong, we felt. I think we still base most importance around the song and the melodies, but then we just try and apply interesting modern techniques to put the music together. We're trying to look forward. Exploring new technology and new techniques is interesting
for us as well, because of its heavy metal connotations. It sounds like it should be a heavy metal album or a heavy metal band. I'm surprised there's not a band called Violator. There must be somewhere, probably LA. We just like the name, really.
Strange love, strange highs and strange lows, strange love. That's how my love goes, strange love. Will you give it to me? Will you take the pain?
With songs like Personal Jesus and Strange Love, Depeche Mode's lyrics have always been at the more thoughtful end of the market. This is pop with O-levels.
I always like to keep things ambiguous, because I think if you pinpoint things too much, if you make things too obvious, then they apply to one situation, and people, can't take it somewhere else. If somebody's not involved in that situation, they feel nothing for the song. Whereas if you leave it more ambiguous, people can see it in many different situations and be moved by a song.
Depeche Mode were recently voted top band by the Russians. Is this yet another step towards the Basildon Boys' world domination?
We're very interested to know if we're going there on tour, because we've never actually made it to Russia. We've played quite a lot of Eastern Bloc countries. Over the years, we've played Hungary a couple of times, Poland, Czechoslovakia, East Germany. But it was always our ambition to make it to Russia, but we never actually. It's just gone on like that. But I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago, somebody pointed out to us that if Daniel snuffed it, we might not get paid, because there was no agreement. Yeah, so I think we did actually sign a piece of paper saying that if anything happened to Daniel, we should still get paid.
My friends, is the most exciting sound coming out of Manchester, England lately? No, not the sound of glass shattering at Strangeways prison, but the psychedelic sounds of the new band, Inspiral Carpets. Inspiral Carpets remind me a bit of early Pink Floyd. You know that short period when Syd Barrett could still speak English. Their pseudo-psychedelia, heard in other Manchester bands like the Stone Roses and Happy Mondays, is threatening to turn the city into the Haight-Ashbury of the 1990s. So, if you're going to old Manchester, be sure to wear a flower in your hair. For Rapido.
The Inspiral Carpets' debut album, Life, marks a move away from their earlier dance sound. Are they just fickle, or have they discovered the point of having tunes?
For me, that album is, the Life is important because it represents a kind of return to the song. There's a lot of actual songs on it. It isn't like a lot of collection of grooves. And I think if we'd gone off and recorded an album which was like very dance orientated and got away from songs, which is what we're best at, it would appear very dated, like in about a year's time when everything's moved on. That's not to like attack dance music, but I mean we're about songs. That's what the band is about.
Black car drives through the town. Some guy from the top estate left a note for a local girl, and yet he had it all on a plate. So this is how it feels to be lonely. This is how it feels to be small. This is how it feels when your word means nothing at all.
In 20 years' time, people will still be listening to This Is How It Feels, and they won't remember Ride On Time, even though Ride On Time is a brilliant dance record. Our stuff's going to last forever, and dance music isn't. So like somebody said, the dance influences in our music are very subtle, as are the rock and roll influences and the psychedelic influences and punk influences. It's just a very even blend of a lot of different things.
At the Brixton Academy last week, the Inspiral Carpets displayed their new blend of indie pop and psychedelia. Although they fiercely deny being a revivalist band, they're one of the few UK acts to use the electric organ, that solid bass to the 60s sound.
The electric guitar is a classic instrument because it never disappeared and came back or anything. But the organ, because people moved on to synthesizers and things like that, they don't see an organ as being a relevant classic instrument, and it is. It's like one of the nicest sounding instruments you could possibly come across, really.
If you looked at it a bit more close as well, I mean, like the way Clint uses the organ, I mean, it's not just a typical organ in the background sound. You know, it's quite a it's like a solo instrument. You know, used like really well. You know, it's not used in the conventional 60s. You know, like a Nuggets sort of way. You know, like sort of all the Nuggets bands and bands like the Stage. You know.
I got a hold of that girl, even though she's not so known. Frustration touches everything. One word is all she needs to win. Ready to, gonna find out why. Ready to, gonna find out someone's gonna make her mind.
Like fellow psychedelic Mancunians, the Stone Roses and the Happy Mondays, the Inspiral Carpets take a shabby view of the press.
The media attention's creating animosity now between the bands, believe it or not, and it's just something we can live without. It's like, it must be the same as like if you've got a show business relationship between a man and a woman, and the press are constantly digging at it and photographing you out with other people, and it's exactly like that kind of thing. That's why those kind of relationships don't last very long, and the Manchester scene, because of the same reasons, won't last very long.
Our Our next story about Billy Idol, you know Billy Idol, will excite many of you girls out there and perhaps some of you boys too, because Rapido interviewed Billy in his bed. And why was Billy Idol in his bed, you ask? Was he dancing with himself again? Mais no, my friends. Billy, like his idol, James Dean, was recently in a motorcycle accident. He broke his arm and leg, but apparently not his head. Well, we'll soon see if that's true. Rapido slipped between the sheets with the king of the sneer to discuss Charmed Life, his first album in 3 years. So get out your bedpans, here is Billy Idol for Rapido.
Hey little sister, what have you done? Hey little sister, who's the only one? Hey little sister, who's your Superman? Hey little sister, who's the one you want? Hey,
After crashing straight into an oncoming car in LA, Billy was hospitalized for over a month and had to have 5 operations.
Well, I had a motorcycle accident, that's what we're kind of talking about, and when I heard the bang, I knew I was all right, because my friends tell me if you have an accident and you hear the bang, you know you're alive, whereas if you don't hear it, you know you're definitely dead. And so I suppose it's just, yeah, coming to in the gutter and realizing I hadn't, you know, I may have hurt myself pretty badly, but there's a good chance I was going to be all right at some point. I'm still alive anyway.
oh, I'd do anything. We'll run away, child. When I'm far from home, don't call me on the phone. Tell me.
Billy's now recovering from a heavy period of physiotherapy, involving plenty of upper lip exercise. He explained his current state of mind.
It's certainly great to be alive. Yeah, I've got a little bit of that kind of, woo, I'm alive kind of feeling at the moment. I suppose anybody who has a kind of bit of a near-death experience always feels like that, you know, that kind of joy to be alive. Everything's great, because at least I'm sort of here to, you know, smelling the daisies or whatever it is, rather than pushing them up, so.
Preferring a heavier sound, longtime guitarist and co-writer Steve Stevens didn't contribute to Idol's latest album, Charmed Life, but Billy still managed to get the new record together, his first for 3 years.
I knew Steve was going to go off and do his solo stuff, so I knew I was going to have to find different people, so I sort of accepted it there and then, and I knew in some ways it would be a little bit more difficult, because I'd come to sort of rely on Steve for lots of things, technological things and great guitar playing. But once I sort of got the idea that I would be doing on my own, of course it sort of meant that I was back to really just playing with myself, you know. I was back to like exploring what I could do, and then that I'd have to rely on myself.
Behind the characteristically macho sound of the new single, Cradle of Love, hides a softer, more sensual side of Billy.
It's really sort of like a glorification of the body, really, because for me the sort of union of a man and woman has brought along my son, sort of thing, and I've seen that sort of life-growing process, which has got a lot to do with the Charmed Life. That's the name of the album. And so I saw the sort of body as being the sort of the cradle of love, really. That's the thing that, you know, the mind and everything harbours sort of feelings of love and soulful feelings that people have.
Ladies and gentlemen, from Los Angeles, California, the Doors!
The new album also contains Billy's version of the Doors' LA Woman, This comes as no surprise, as Billy is making his movie debut in an Oliver Stone film about Jim Morrison, the Doors' late singer.
Yeah, I'm really excited about being in it. I mean, you know me, I'm a rock and roll fan, so the idea that I could be in one of the greatest rock and roll movies ever, I mean, that really, really excited me. And then when I broke my leg, I mean, I was really bummed out really about it. I thought that Oliver Stone would immediately give my part away to somebody else, and when he didn't, I was actually knocked out. And I think he knows that when I get on that set, he's gonna get it all.
The not quite so young amongst you might remember the rock and roll circus of 1969 that brought together the Beatles, the Stones, Jimi Hendrix, all these people that started on this stage, and certainly some others that I can't remember anymore. My memory is not what it used to be. Anyway, all that to say that rock and roll circus is still alive and well in 1980, or rather that a circus that is more rock and roll than any other one before has been making quite a name for itself in France and Australia. This circus is called Archaos and is directed by the famous Pierre Bidon. And it's wild, rough, rebellious, dangerous, and raw, and it doesn't take a genius to realize that it's 2,000 times more rock than, for example, off the top of my head, Cliff Richard, produced by Stock Aitken and Waterman. Why is this crazy circus such a success? Why do the spectators, having once escaped death, come back so willingly for more? And why was the job of providing the music for Archaos given to the band Chihuahua rather than, for example, off the top of my head, Cliff Richard, produced by Stock Aitken and Waterman? All the answers to all these questions right now in Rapido.
Director Pierre Bidon never made it to Texas in time for the Chainsaw Massacre, but found an alternative outlet for his talents by setting up the Archaos Circus in 1985.
Archaos, c'est un nom qu'on a choisi parce qu'il commence par un A pour être en tête des listes alphabétiques. Et c'est un mot qui vient du grec et qui signifie en grec le pouvoir, le commencement, car le pouvoir que donne le commencement de quelque chose, ce qui est bien significatif et bien attribué, qui est bien attribué au Archaos.
Like a traditional circus, the members of Archaos lead a vagrant life. But instead of clapping seals and performing elephants, they treat their audiences to the tumultuous last show on Earth.
C'est né d'un constat qui est que j'avais fait beaucoup de cirque avant et qui était que le cirque n'a pas grand-chose à dire, est simplement démonstratif et sportif. Et ça venait de l'idée d'utiliser le cirque pour dire quelque chose, pour exprimer quelque chose et faire vibrer les spectateurs au-delà de la démonstration et de l'exploit pur et simple.
The circus now has over 55 performers, taken from street shows, clubs and theatres all over France.
Ils ont tous des techniques très très fortes, qu'ils soient trapézistes, acrobates, équilibristes, jongleurs, etc. Et ensuite, il y a des mises en situation qui font qu'on utilise, que ces techniques sont utilisées en relation avec quelque chose qui a exprimé, quelque chose qui est au fond d'eux-mêmes, au fond de chacun d'eux, et puis mis en contraste avec des gros engins, parce que quelque chose qui est en contraste, on le voit beaucoup mieux. C'est pour ça qu'aussi qu'il y a des grues, des élévateurs, des voitures qui tombent, etc. Pour mieux qu'on voit après la trapéziste qui chante qui fait son trapèze en chantant l'opéra lyrique suspendu à une grue. Quand j'ai commencé à monter ce deuxième cirque, j'ai commencé à voir un peu parmi les musiciens qui voulaient venir avec nous pour monter l'orchestre. Et puis, par un matin d'avril, il y a Chihuahua, Napo, qui tape à la porte comme ça. Il dit voilà, on a un groupe Chihuahua, on aimerait bien jouer avec vous et tout. Bon, c'est une idée, qu'est-ce que vous faites? On écoute la cassette et tout. Ah ouais, ça me plaît bien, ça n'a rien à voir avec ce qu'on a fait jusqu'à maintenant, mais vous y avez le goût, oh ouais, ouais, et vous vous sentez bien à la hauteur et tout, oh ouais, bon, ben allez hop, on y va, et c'est ça qui va faire l'étincelle, quoi. Quand on regarde le spectacle, on a l'impression que tout est improvisé, la violence, qu'il y a beaucoup de violence, etc. Mais en fait, tout ça est très bien construit et calculé au millimètre près, parce qu'en plus, c'est extrêmement dangereux. Ça va très très vite, c'est construit comme des clips vidéo. Les images défilent à toute vitesse et se croisent à toute vitesse. Alors si des fois tu quittes, tu perds 3 secondes sur ton champ, ben, tu tombes dans le champ d'après, où là, ça peut être dangereux.
Our next story is not so much about a famous person, but a famous place, a recording studio located in New Orleans, in the French Quarter, of course. But it's not very easy to interview a recording studio, as our Rapido crew found out after spending 3 hours trying to get a mixing board to speak. So instead, we met with Daniel Lanois, who has a larger vocabulary than most mixing boards, is the mastermind behind the studio and producer of the Neville Brothers, Bob Dylan, and U2. So will this be the next Sun Studios or the next Abbey Road, or is it just another excuse for the Rapido crew to go on a drinking binge in New Orleans? You, my friends, shall be the judge.
Originally from Canada, Lanois has now based his production empire in a period mansion in New Orleans.
Started in New Orleans with the idea of making one record with the Neville Brothers. And then Bob Dylan came through town and dropped by and heard a few things and liked it. Next thing we know, we're doing a Bob Dylan record. So then the time came to do my record, and I didn't want to move again, so we just stayed there and worked on my record. So it's a wonderful city.
Now my tears, they roll down to measure, and I remember the days and the promises that we made.
The studio provides a unique form of Southern comfort, as manager Max Howard explains.
Daniel's approach to a studio, and it's quite simple and really makes a lot of sense, is one of, you create an atmosphere that the musicians feel comfortable in and they don't feel intimidated by the equipment and the space design of the equipment. It's one of where the space is here for the music and the musicians to dominate and not the equipment to dominate the musicians.
On travaille aujourd'hui, on travaille sous la pluie, on travaille au tabac ici. Mes mains sont noires à cochon.
Lanois is a bit of a musical fogey, well known for his dislike of anything modern, especially digital technology.
It's a formula that works. There's the equipment that exists here is vintage tube analog equipment. You know, we won't even use a computer for business recollection purposes. Everything's on paper. We don't even deal with, if it's got a microchip in it, you have to think twice about letting it in the house, which is another trademark of Daniel's sound, is the fact that he uses all relatively old, according to industry standards, equipment.
Broken hands, unbroken plows, broken treaties, broken vows.
Lanois produced Bob Dylan's most recent record, Oh Mercy, hailed as his best since the mid-70s.
Bob's sitting here, my sitting here, playing instruments, a recording console right there. We were looking to capture this record. If it was good in one take, we had it. So I didn't have a problem with that concept. But at the same time, putting care into a record has to be combined with spontaneity and getting it in one take.
We live in a political world, turning and thrashing about. As soon as you're awake, you're trade to take. It looks like the easy way out.
Revamping the Dylan drawl involved using a wide range of local Louisiana talent. According to Mark Howard,
the Bob Dylan projects that we worked on here in town, we used a lot of local musicians, all local musicians, various folks of different styles and natures. One day they'd have Rockin' Doopsie and his Cajun Twisters in working on something. The next day he'd have Mason Ruffner in working on something. Then he'd have the Neville Brothers folks working on something. And between all of those folks on that line, it got a very unique and contrasting sounds for the entire record.
And the words fill my head, and they fall to the floor. That it's all done outside. Inside the next wall.
I like the idea of bringing music to New Orleans as much as taking music from it.
It is an extraordinarily well-kept garage that we go now to meet a true guitar hero who first appeared in Britain during the so-called blues boom of the early 60s. Now, seeing that Eric Clapton has already been our guest at Rapido at least 29 times, and that Jimmy Page refuses to sit at any table, even a turning one, if there is the slightest trace of grease about, I must, you will already have guessed, be talking about Jeff Beck. Jeff Beck was currently preparing to go on tour as part of a purely instrumental trio. And that's to say, without a singer or even Laurie Anderson, and who has just released a new album, Guitar Shop. I get a bit lost counting, but it's certainly not his first, huh? No. Nevertheless, today we'll hear Jeff Beck surrounded by the hot rods he builds and collects, which explains the garage I mentioned a moment ago. Jeff Beck for Rapido.
another instrumental album and another instrumental tour. Just what has the legendary plank spanker got against singers?
I mean, I'm looking all the time for singers because that seems to be the golden key to getting onto airplay, you know, radio. Oh, guitar, we don't want that, no. Jazz, put that in the jazz file, you know. That's the sort of attitude, you know. And it's not the way things are because people like to hear it. They like to hear a lot of music without silly candy-ass vocals on them, you know. And yet you miss out on the vital airplay stuff sometimes. So be it, you know. Stick by your guns, really.
Rod Stewart is the only singer to have collaborated with Jeff for long. They first played together in the late 60s, and on this showing, they're still close.
He was great. I mean, the early days, this wild sort of screeching. I mean, when we were playing in 68, 69, I think it was, there was nothing like it around. I still don't think there's been anything quite like it. And he would hang on to notes, you know, for ages, and I could just play off of them, you know, and sort of build up my own little scene at the side there.
Jeff was featured heavily on both of Mick Jagger's recent solo albums.
Went on a bit from there, and I sensed that he was going to ask me to go on the road, and I didn't mind that, but it was a bit designer rocky for me. Simon Phillips on drum, great. Doug Wimbish on bass, fabulous. 3 of us, look out. But it went from there to 6 keyboard players and 4 rhythm guitarists, and entire leg-kicking girls and all the rest of it, you know. Can't handle that.
Much more unexpected was his work on Malcolm McLaren's Waltz Darling, particularly as he once dismissed new wave music as junk, but times change.
Yeah, I always respected somebody like Malcolm, who's the best con man ever, probably, since I don't know when. And not in the bad sense, I mean that in a really good sense, because he's a creative artist, you know. He gave the world punk, what more do you want? You know, that completely overthrew the whole record business, and that appealed to me. The way it was going, we'd all been asleep by now if they hadn't come along.
Not for Jeff Beck, the Aston Martins, vintage planes or Harleys favoured by rock's roaring boys, he lavishes his time on the rather more homely hobby of hot rod cars.
They're car-related, a lot of the things are car-related because that's where I spend all my time, you know, banging away on these things and just getting into the fibre. I've been into street rods for 25 years, you know, and building chassis and things. There is a close affinity with cars and rock and roll. Speed and all that sort of thing. Not necessarily just speed, but other, you know, the glamour of it all, you know. Even in this thing, there'll be glamour in a couple of months.
As one of the architects of the modern guitar sound, Jeff is not too impressed by some of the heavy metal bands that dominate today's American rock scene.
It just seems that there's about 4,000 heavy metal rock bands all trying to play the same song, all going for the holy grail, you know, sort of. One day they'll get it, but I don't know what it is they're after at the moment. They've all got the same guitar, roughly the same guitar sound, and they're all playing the same solo. It's all great stuff, but no one's doing anything really dangerous, you know. And that's really what I always thought rock and roll was, the ultimate danger.
Rapido follow-up and finish. Join us next week, won't you please, with stories on Spanish bands, Aswad, Charlie Lee Couture, Was Not Was, and Public Enemy. And now, the time has come for me to say, allez, salut maintenant.
Rapido.